special branch of an MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for special grant in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually looks at geopolitics in the round. Today's episode is part 2 of an episode that I started last week.
That there are lots of high-profile cases where the general public kind of say on social media or on news comments or in interviews or whatever, they're very vocal about how they sort of feel personally attached to those victims, or they feel like they know them, or they, it's like that thing. I mean, how many times would you have gone to a crime scene, or somebody in the force might have gone to a crime scene, and the neighbours would have said, oh, there were such lovely people, or couldn't happen to nicer people or whatever. Well, they probably weren't. They probably thought about the bins every Wednesday. They probably moaned about parking spaces all the time.
Well, you don't speak ill of the dead, do you? That's the point.
You don't speak.
Very few people speak ill of the dead. So
you don't speak ill of the dead. But what I'm saying is, it's not the, it's not the neighbours who obviously, whether they thought about the parking space or whether the cat peed in their garden or whatever. That's not the point. It's the point is, then the Daily Mirror runs a story on it.
That's the point.
Suddenly it's filled up with comments of people going, oh, they look like nice people,
Lovely people,
she, the child's ginger, so obviously there's incest in the family.
Now, the point that I wanted to get to you were
obviously, hopefully the listeners realise that I'm joking, but that is the level of of defamatory comments that you do sometimes get. And back in the day, certainly circling back to Oscar Pistorius, back in those days, back in 2013, those sorts of things went unmoderated.
Well, the point I wanted to get to you was this, or for you to bring out in this discussion, is what makes the media make somebody into that person who is of interest. Because you see, let's take the case. Yeah, let's take this one. The case up in Greater Manchester, where wasn't Greater Manchester, Lancashire, sorry, where the lady eventually was found to have fallen into the river, which the police said that was day one. Right? What made that case of the utmost interest for the media? That's my question to you. The other part of my question is, why does the media continue to put forward the perspective that they know better than the police and the police are not professional? So the way they do it is they basically suggest that Miss Marple could do a better job than the police always. That's kind of the position. So any amateur can turn up and basically run a case. Now,
yeah, okay.
Our films show this in a way. Our films show this in a way where they always show an individual officer often doing something. When, particularly in Britain, murders have big teams. It's not just one guy or gal deciding, oh, we're going to do this, that, t'other. They are big teams. Now, in the United States, you can get away with that because there's so many murders. They do just have one or two detectives working a case of a murder, particularly of, and this is the important thing, listen to it when I say it, particularly of people who don't matter. You hear what I've said there? They do assess, does this person matter? Right? So if, as they would put it in America, a gangbanger, right, kills another gangbanger, you're not really going to get a big team of detectives looking at that. You're going to get one or two guys who's the guy who was up on the day, the guy who got the call, and maybe his partner. They're going to look at that case. In Britain, regardless of generally who it is, there's a big murder team, a murder squad looking at it with a lot of actions. You look at that, you look at this, see if that rope was sold throughout the United Kingdom. When was it made? When was it finished? Etc., etc., etc. It's big. There's a big old process around it because we have 520, 560 murders a year, right, in our country. Whereas they're looking at, in America, often in the cities, 520 murders in a single city of 2 million people. We're talking about a country of, 68 million people. This is a difference. So why we go down this route of assuming it's all child's play with a few people looking at it, one fella, one woman looking at it as some lone ranger in our country is absolute nonsense. Why have we gone down this route? Why have films gone down this route? Why has the media gone down this route? This is my question to you. Can you put some context to that, please, Fergs?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so just go back to the start of what you were saying. So you started off talking about Nicola Bulley, and your
Correct.
listeners can listen to the if
Our
they
podcast,
scroll back through the podcast, so you can listen to what we had to say about that. But if you but in the 80s there was this woman called Susie Lampley.
Correct. Susie Lampley, remember it? Yeah.
And she's still not found, is she? She's
estate agent wasn't found. Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but there is a parity because I mean, I'm being slightly flippant because they were both estate agents, right? But to go back to what you said before, well, the reason why it's of interest is because they're white, they're pretty, they're middle class, they've got the sort of job that people relate
let me stop
to.
you.
They've got children.
Fergus, let me stop you. Is that actually articulated? From what you just said, we can surmise it, but is that articulated by whomever sends you out on the job, the editor or whomever? Does she, do they articulate that? The white, the pretty, the middle class? Do they actually say that?
Not in so many words, Carlton, but at the same time,
it's a given.
Look, you know that, I know that. Okay, and the bottom line is that papers need to sell papers, right? So think about who papers are selling. Think about who's buying / reading the papers.
Yep.
They want to hear. They want to support their own. They want to hear about their own kind. They want to. But I do think what you're saying about the Have a Go heroes is really interesting as well. Because people do. I mean, that there is that real thing, and Nicola Bulley being a great case in point. Like the whole county came out and sort of walked up and down the river and looked for the dog and blah blah blah, and really, and I mean they shut the roads, didn't they? Because there were people with placards trying to trying to actually stop cars and sort of I mean, like if you were in South Africa, you'd call that carjacking, but in Middle England, they were calling it aiding the police investigation.
But what makes you think? This is what I'm trying to get out. This is now. I'm honing into the newspaper woman now. I'm honing into you. So what makes you write that in a positive light in the newspaper, but put negative pressure on the police at the same time? Because there has been a change, hasn't there? At one stage in the 70s, it was clear to me that the newspapers supported the police. It was very clear to me. When you read the newspapers in those days gone by, police were supported. Now it's anything but. If you can
Yeah,
find the
but
smallest little thing, anything
it's
but. So
not so
what's
long ago.
made that
I mean,
change?
it's not so long ago. I mean, it's only since the late 90s where there hasn't been like a press conference whereby the media would have been informed at that point. I mean, like I say, I haven't worked in the newsroom since 2005, but it's a power shift, I think.
Right. From where to where?
From there used to be a point where so look, you've got your landscapes, you've got your court reporters that are just basically trotting on down to report about some local disputes that have gone through local courts, and that's making those local paper court pages. And then you've got your kind of national crime reporters, right? But now it's the BBC, Channel 4 have whole divisions, have investigative journalism teams, squads, right, where they're trying to break the story first. I mean,
Right.
I mean, just look at the post office scandal reportage on ITV. I mean, since when did ITV become detectives, right?
Exactly.
Or
Exactly
lawyers even, right?
Exactly that.
And we will talk about the post office scandal on another episode, because as I've narrated in the past, our lawyers represented work pro bono for a couple of the victims, so they have some quite interesting takes on it. But yeah, that's the power shift, you see, because now the media kind of, they, for better or for worse, they do think they can get that story first. They do think that they can solve that crime, and imagine
So
how.
now this is the other side to that coin then. Again, I would argue that in Margaret Thatcher's era, like at Lover, whatever, right? In Margaret Thatcher's era, the politician, okay, particularly the Tory, was clearly orientated towards the side of the police. And that came from Thatcher down. She loved the police, right? Now, Labour were somewhat occasionally ambivalent, particularly on the left of Labour. But the middle class and the right of Labour, or the middle position, the centrists, if you will, right of Labour, tended to be middle class people, they again were police positive. What I've seen is a complete change where if you will, the middle classes in both Labour, Conservative, Liberals are now anti-police. Not just nothing, but anti-police. It was clear to me that our one-time Prime Minister and the longest-serving Home Secretary was anti-police. Not even, on the sort of side of thinking, oh, where are we with it? Theresa May was anti-police. Right? Now, you wouldn't survive in politics in the Thatcher era being anti-police. Now it seems to be something that you have to be in order to get voted in. So my question is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, the media or the politician? Or does the politician allow the media to spin itself around into that position? Because what we've been talking about today is how the media set up a position. Now, social media plays a role too, and I'm not sure where social media is on the police perspective, whether it's anti or pro. I'm not sure. Depending on who you look at, it can spin either way. But definitely, the legacy mass media is now anti the police. I will argue that. Your thoughts?
Dr. Rachel would say, well, okay. So see, this is two separate questions really, and both very valid and interesting. In the landscape of politics, and especially talking about Theresa May, I guess you have to think about, like, what would the alternative be to supporting the police? What's the agenda? right?
Well, they had their agenda when they supported the police. Obviously, Margaret Thatcher's agenda was that she needed the police to be a bulwark against what they saw in those days of left-wing extremism. So you could argue, understandably, that's why they saw it. But then that doesn't say why Labour would be that way. But Labour in the middle, as I said, middle line Labour, not left wing Labour, middle line Labour, and definitely right wing Labour, because they were in both of them, were clearly also pro police in that sense. They were. It was clear to me. The left weren't, obviously, but the others were. That spun around. That's what I'm saying. And I don't know if the media began to spin it, so the politicians thought, oh, we can be like that, or whether and politicians run with anything that gives them numbers, or whether the politicians showed that and the media ran with it. I don't know which is which. That's my question to you.
Yeah, I suppose that like the most basic answer would say would be that, attacking the police is a cheap headline, isn't it? In the nicest possible way. I mean, the
There's no downside, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think DC and Theresa May, weren't thinking about the. Okay, I'm going to think about my words here, but they weren't thinking about the positive outcome of what the future of the police force could look like. They were just sort of,
headline of the day,
damning it for being a huge expense and outing situations where the police had got things wrong and were costly to the country and all the rest of it. But I think that, and actually, I know we said at the start, it's great that we get these opportunities to unpick things. And Dr. Rachel's obviously doing secret and very important work. I think she would have a lot to say about the psychological relationship when it comes to electioneering. The kind of the psychological relationship that that politicians might think that certain people have emotively with the police, and therefore it's quite an easy thing to spin.
Absolutely.
I think also.
But why was that not the case before? That's really my question, is why was that not the case before? I'm guessing, tell me if I'm wrong, but when I grew up, people say, oh, they respected the police because they feared them, for one, right? And of course, the working class was much more supplanted in the working class. So one of the things I think the dislike of the police is that the middle classes dislike a working class profession as they perceive it. It's not the case, but as they perceive it, that's got beyond its station. That's what I think. They were happy when they thought that the police were dealing with working class criminals. When they started hitting on middle class people for a whole host of different crimes that were middle class in orientation, from drink drive to fraud, say, yeah. And when I'm saying fraud, I'm talking about fiscal actions. Your Michelle Mone type crime, okay, that they maybe thought they were stepping outside of an area that, it's okay when you're dealing with those people that might affect us. We're happy for that. And we want the working classes to be happy with that, to be kept down by this body. But when they start looking at things that really shouldn't be in their purview, maybe then they don't like it. And then that's why everybody starts hitting at them.
But I mean, look, the village I grew up in, right? The local police officer used to knock on the door once a week and check everything was all right, and he'd come into the school. I remember what there was I must have been about 10, and the police came into our school, and we did this treasure hunt thing, right? And we as in like the kids had all kind of designed it, and and it was supposed to be like can we solve the clues quicker than the police can solve the clues and everything. And I just remember, like, they just played, like, hung out with us, did it, like, played cricket with us. I mean, okay, maybe there just were no other crimes to solve that day, but I just think that the reputation built on personal relationships and kind of word of mouth, as opposed to propaganda, meant that people and also, so I mean, if we want to get bigger about this, budgets and recruitment and staffing and all the rest of it, but I mean, there was some point in my memory where there were quite clearly enough police officers to be going knocking on village doors, checking everyone was all right.
Or you allowed that to happen. You're happy for that to happen. You see, the other thing I will say, you're absolutely right.
Well, yeah, because I suppose the counter argument, if there are enough staff, is what the heck are they all doing now?
Yeah. Then? See. Well, the point is this: I could have no crime tomorrow, literally no crime tomorrow, because if you make everything legal, then you've got no crime, right? So figure these things through. The Drugs Act of 1971.
I'm pretty sure, Carlton, right? I am being flippant here. I'm just interjecting here that Snoop Dogg could probably have no crime tomorrow as well.
Exactly. So the point I'm making is, if you don't have a Drugs Act of 1971, which makes cannabis, etc., all illegal, and then you can get nick fit, blah blah blah, right, and you can keep going, then you haven't got a war on drugs, have you? So that's a good percentage of your crime gone right there. If you then have a situation as it was when I joined, where you couldn't rape your wife, right? You could commit other offences with your wife, but you couldn't rape her because you had your conjugal rights. So you've got some of the offence gone right there. If you looked at things like pornography, yeah, it's a very good one. In fact, right now you will get done for producing, for making, for taking indecent photographs. You may just look at them on a screen. That's sufficient. You haven't made them. You haven't set them up. You have never spoken to anybody, but you're done for that. So that's another crime right there. And these crimes are en masse. So let's think of more.
Oh, R. Kelly. We should have spoken about R. Kelly, shouldn't we? Yeah, but
I mean, nobody's arguing that these shouldn't be crimes. What I'm saying is, when you make them crimes, there's obviously something that comes with it. Yeah, and that is, where do the police put their efforts? You speak to old-time officers, and they'd say, "Oh, there was never any problem in my day, 60s or 70s. We turn up to a fight in a pub. It wasn't like today. They were just using their fists." And then you speak to the people who were doing the fighting, and they say, "Oh, we used to, if we were doing, let's say, hay bales, and we had the sheaf with us, we'd use the sheaf in a battle." So hang on, which was it? Were they using the sheaf in the battle, which now is an offensive weapon, 1958 Act? Before the 1958 Act, it isn't one. Again, firearms are all now illegal in Britain practically. Before, you could own them. A flick knife is illegal since 1958. Before, you could have them. A blade of 3.5 inches is illegal. Before, you could have it. So now these are all offences. So the problem is, we're making more and more and more and more offences all the time. Drugs being the primary one. Before, you go back to the old days, people talk about laudanum. Yeah, you know that from your old readings. They were taking bloody morphine all the time and getting high, but they weren't offences. So now you're making them all offences. So what now happens? What happens with these offences? This is where the problem lies. So now you police are in people's lives all the time. And maybe people don't like that. Maybe that's how police got worse. I don't know.
Do you remember, well, Carlton, do you remember when CFC gases were banned, and was it Norway that made them illegal first, and then because they made it a criminal offence, they just had this like massive backlog of like there wasn't enough prison space for people that had basically gone overboard with their like can of Lynx Africa or whatever. But you know what I mean. I hear your point. Right, okay, this is a slight curveball, but you totally made me think about this, and I've always wondered this, right? That song, that musical song that goes "My old man said follow the van."
Yeah.
And come on, it's a working class song, so you
My
must.
old man should fall
Right.
over the vein. Like the singing?
There's a line in it that goes, "You can't trust a special like the old time coppers when you can't find your way home." What does that mean?
Ah, that's interesting. Right. So now, and I think personally, my personal opinion, I think the idea of special constables, now also police, CPSOs, police and crime community support people, right? I think that is one of the areas or you've got motorway enforcement officers. These are all areas to how you undermine the police. Because if you're a professional body, you don't turn around and be a doctor and say, you know what, we'll have special doctors who just turn up when they want because it's like a job. We'll pay them a couple of quid for the uniform, for the doctor's uniform and a stethoscope, and they can do, all operations like a doctor. Because somewhere along the line, somebody's going to say, well, hang on, why do we need the full-time ones? Now, a special is somebody who is not a full-time officer, but is a special constable and has all the powers of a full-time officer, right, within the police area. So just within the police area. So if that's the Met, then within the Met. If it's Lancashire, within Lancashire area, or if it's Devon and Cornwall, within Devon and Cornwall area. And sometimes contaminants if they just go over the border, right? A police officer, however, a full-time officer, it has the powers throughout England and Wales, right? And if he's in Scotland, throughout Scotland, and if he's in Northern Ireland, just talking about United Kingdom now. So what you've got is this body of people who, if you will, some people call them hobby bobbies, who work as part-time officers on the day off or whatever. They have a full uniform like everybody else, and they just go out and they do police work. They're generally not, or didn't used to be, in things like CID, but I've heard of them now being traffic officers who are specials. So that old tune is talking about when they started this special thing, people becoming a special constable, that you could carry out the acts of a constable, albeit you're not a proper constable. Then they went that step further. And at the time I was with Blunkers and I said, you're strike breaking here, aren't you? Albeit the police couldn't strike and haven't been able to strike since 1911. The only body at the time who could not strike, anybody else could in the country, but the police couldn't. They basically created CPSOs. Now, he wanted them as a lower paid set of individuals with no police powers practically, right? But they were perceived in a police uniform. So what you had was more police as far as the public were concerned, but they weren't really police because they had none of the police powers. So you could do citizens arrest because every citizen can. So let me explain that. So if you see that a crime has happened, when an arrestable offence has taken place, any person may arrest any person whom has committed that offence. Okay, that's the law. So you've carried out an arrestable offence, you've seen it, and you're arresting them. The powers of an officer, however, were a constable. It's always in the constable. It's always in the lower rank generally. The constable has these powers. It doesn't matter what your senior rank is. It's the constable in our laws. So where a constable suspects, so he's suspecting it, that an arrestable offence has been committed, he may arrest any person whom he suspects has committed that offence. So in other words, you don't know either way. The two suspicions, absolutely powerful. Two suspicions, but you can arrest that person because you suspect the arrestable offence has been committed and you suspect this geezer has committed the arrestable offence. Right? So you can now arrest that person. Now, you're on a bit of stony ground because if you're wrong, then you've got to explain why you're wrong. But you can do it. When I look at my European colleagues, right, and you take Jean de Police in France, example, or gendarmerie in France, they don't have those type of powers. They cannot arrest people whom they don't who they don't have any evidence to suggest has committed the offence. They have to do like a normal citizen's arrest. The offence has been committed. We've seen it. We can nick you. Boom, job done. The gendarmerie have a few more powers because they're in the countryside, so they can do a few more things. But the gens de police in the cities, they have to see the offence. Now, a police judiciary, now the judicial police, the CID, they can arrest people under suspicions, right? But of course, all of that goes back to the district attorney because the district attorney, the Staatsanwalt in Germany, or the the judicial magistrate, the investigating magistrate, they're the ones who actually do the investigation in Europe, not the police. They direct the police to the investigation. In Britain, the CPS do not direct police. What the CPS now do, though, is they tell police whether you can charge the person, whether they will allow it to be charged so they can put them in front of a court. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is as follows. The police do the investigation. So, police, we've done it, we've investigated them. We think these are the guys who've committed the offence. I'll make it concrete. Within 10 days of Stephen Lawrence murder, the police had 5 people whom they thought had committed the offence. They had arrested them and put them in. They then call the CPS, because that's what they need to do. So that the CPS isn't running the investigation, but for them to be put in front of a court, they have to go to the CPS. So they call it, and CPS say, not enough evidence. So the police release these guys, right? Now, what's the problem with that? As far as the public's concerned, the police have done nothing because these guys have not been put in front of a court. When in reality, the CPS has said, no, there's not enough evidence because they run on a 60-40 chance of that crime being found guilty. That's what they used to run on, 60-40. So not enough evidence, we're not taking it to court. And you can't take a case to court without the CPS, like the Crown prosecution. That's the Crown. They're the ones working on the behalf of the Crown. So what you now have is a body that decides whether people go in front of a court and can scupper your whole case, but takes none of the responsibility for scuppering your case. Because when people come back, as you've seen with lots, oh, it took the police years to do that. No, within 10 days they had the people. The CPS said there wasn't enough. What should be happening is the CPS, I think, either run it as investigating magistrates, so the fault sits with them fully, or they don't run it as investigating magistrates, and the police say, we want that to go in front of a court, and you do your best to prosecute them. And if they don't, that's so be it. But if you have this halfway house, the CPS take all the credit. So when something happens that goes to court, you see, like now, Starmer, I put this and this terrorist away. No, you didn't, Starmer. The police investigated that. The police put the bundles together, which is all the evidence, all the information, checked out all what the crime is, looked at everything, looked at all the assets. You just prosecuted it. You didn't do any investigation, Keir Starmer. None. The police did it. In France, that investigating magistrate. In Germany, that Staatsanwalt. In Italy, that investigating, or in Spain, they can say, we did the investigation, because they did. They directed the police as to what to do, and they carry the can. None of these CPS people carry the can here. They just stand in front of a court and said, oh, we did a great job, blah, 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 blah. They don't even fill the paperwork out. The bundles are all done by police, by CID.
But okay.
What kind of system's that? It's a rubbish system.
Yeah, it's completely rubbish. But okay, so look, going back to what you said about Maggie Thatcher, because I think that is interesting. Well, I mean, it's obviously all interesting, but sort of where did, if we had to sort
good catch there, folks.
It's all interesting, but where I'm going with this is, if we had to put a flag in the sand about where did this all go wrong,
yeah,
that's where I'm getting at, right? Because she had a, like, you know, so what you're saying is basically the sort of people that you might, that the press might have called Thatcher's boot boys. You're sort of saying that actually they were sort of you know, they were the, you know,
she loved them because they were doing something that she required, you know, minor strike, etc., etc.
But she did, yeah, exactly. But and so, like, all the, exactly, right. So everything that you know, like the poll tax riots and stuff like that, you know, and she was just using the, but is what you're saying that those officers might not have been you know, might have been voluntary, or you know, they were quite, they were what you'd call bobbies on the beat, weren't they, or whatever.
When Margaret Thatcher's like for the police was not orientated to any particular section, you know, obviously the special branch looked after her, you know, in terms of protection, and the special branch.
But the ones that she would have sent out to very visually,
the regular people who carry out those jobs,
TV,
no,
you know, there was football.
They don't send them out. This is where our system works, right? Politicians theoretically do not control the police. This is the theory behind it. You know, this is me speaking as a criminologist now. Theoretically, politicians do not control the police in Britain, right? The chief constable, or in the Met or place, the commissioner, right, controls his people on operational policing. What you then had was above and beyond the operational policing, or at the side of the operational policing, you had police directional perspective. So the Home Office, in the old days, the watch committees and the councils, they then decided, if it's a county force, they decided, oh, this is where we think police effort should go into. So this tripartite in those days looked at, this is where we think it should go. In the Met, it was different, because the Met had the Home Secretary in those days as its head of the police politically. So there was no council, there was no watch committees. It was the Home Secretary and the Home Office direct, right? Because the Met, you know, was doing a lot of national roles, like special branch example. So they were acutely aware of what the police were doing for them or with them. Now, the other aspect is, this is where you need to split it. There's political policing. So in terms of the miners' strike, yes, you had regular everyday officers going up, because the government of the day said, we want to make sure, this is how they got to put it, see, make sure that no offences are committed in terms of these people striking within the law, but not preventing secondary, what do they call it in those days? In other words, you couldn't, if a driver was driving coal to somewhere and his people were not on strike, then he had absolute right to drive that van, to pick the coal up and to move it on. If some parts of the NUM weren't on strike, example, and they wanted to keep working, they had a right to work. So the police job there was to make sure those people who wanted to work had a right to work. That's what they were doing there. They weren't particularly suppressing the miners. They were just saying, right, these are people who want to work, want to keep earning a salary, right? Be they coke vans, bringing them over to power stations, etc., etc. Because what had happened in the past, if you remember 10 years earlier, there'd been secondary picketing and etc., and secondary actions by trades unions that had brought the country to a standstill when there was a miners' strike. So they wanted to prevent that, so they brought laws in. And all police do is carry out the laws of the land. That's all they basically do, right? They don't make them, doesn't mean to say that they like them, they just carry them out, right? Because that's their role. So that's what they're doing. So now you get the other side of that, though, the political policing aspect. So my role, I knew, example, that Colonel Gaddafi was sending money to the miners' strike, because Colonel Gaddafi's perspective was, we read for that, other agencies, the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, the CIA, had tried actions against Gaddafi in his country. Gaddafi's saying, these are my actions against you in your country. So he supports the IRA, he supports the miners' strike, supports anything that will undermine the United Kingdom. Additionally to that, we're at the time of the Cold War still, and of course the Soviet bloc countries, Soviet Union, and the Eastern Bloc countries are aiding and assisting, because, of course, it again causes strife within the United Kingdom. So that is positive to them in those days, because we were doing the same in the other day with Solidarność, example, in Poland, yeah, supporting them against the Soviet bloc systems. So this was a bigger picture. So you've got the macro and you've got the micro and the macro playing within the same sphere, right? That's what you've got. But Thatcher knows she required the police to be on side, right, in order to break the miners, not by doing anything illegal, but by making sure that the police are willing to put the numbers in. And this is how they do it. They say to the Home Office, okay, fund the police to provide officers from all around the country to go up to the pits and put them on standby there to prevent people stopping people who want to work from working, to not prevent that. See, so what you're doing is you're making the funds available, because otherwise the police will say, well, we don't have the funds to do that. We've got to police our own area. No, we'll make those funds available to you, right? And then, of course, this is the other side that you can never legislate for. There's people who want to get on. So they know that the Home Office wants that to happen. So they aren't going to go against it because they want to be at the top of the tree. They want to be the commissioner or the chief constable of a country, of a county police force. So what happens is they all begin, or many, begin to sing to the tune that they and all the government wants them to sing to. You see what I mean? This is how the police, which is an independent body, becomes a little less independent. But as soon as there's a problem, you will find that the politician turns around and says, I do not control the police. What the police do is up to them. They work within the law. Because then they let the police get run over by the bus, right? That's how they play the game. So the politician, when you're doing what they want, you're good guys. When you could be falling away for whatever reason, things that they have effectively ordered to happen, they jump away from it and say, nothing to do with us. That's down to the police. They're independent, right? That's the way it works. So the police are generally in the middle.
Yeah, it's funny though, isn't it? Because like the perception of the whole sort of thin blue line brand, or whatever, I suppose, is that the I don't know, the ideological thin blue line is the line between it's the police keeping chaos from, you know, civilians, I suppose.
Correct.
You know, and obviously, you know, Thatcher was incredibly behind that. I mean, like, to be fair though, she paid them a lot. Though,
to be fair, this is what's interesting. You're talking about the Edmund Davis jump of the amount of the police in terms of police payment. That actually came in under Labour. Labour put that in, but then Labour lost, and that rise was given to the police when Thatcher was in. But Labour had actually made the Edmund Davis work. Because if you remember, there's a lot of corruption in policing in the 60s. And they wanted to stop that corruption by paying them more money. And Labour were the ones who made that happen, to pay them more money. But the Conservatives got the advantage from it.
That's really interesting.
Now, the other factor is this, and this is, you know, quite as interesting. It's a very technical profession, but people don't want it to be. They want to see it as easy. So the thin blue line is actually correct. Generally, what the police are trying to do, and understand this, the police do not swear allegiance to the government. They swear allegiance to the crown. Now, you think that doesn't matter, but it actually does, because all they're there to do is uphold the Queen's peace, now the King's peace. So the government shouldn't really be functional around them. The government make the laws, yes. Well, to be fair, let's come back to a real understanding of it. The government are the executive. So the government actually carry out what's going on the day. The legislature makes the laws, which is Parliament in our country. They're the ones making the laws. The police have to uphold the laws of the land, which are signed off by the Crown. So all the police is doing is working to the Crown, right? Now, generally what happens with the police is they're looking at it in all perspectives and they're saying, right, we do not want trouble and strife on our streets. Because what a lot of people forget is, and this is the thing, it's a art, not a science. Nobody knows when some organization's actions are going to lead for them down the road to be terrorists and down the road to be revolutionaries, example. So, and I say this because the IRA example in the 60s was defeated in the 50s, really. In the 60s, 68, what the IRA was nothing. They had a few old guys still dreaming of the old days. This is Northern Ireland, still dreaming of the old days. But what there was a massive civil rights movement, right, for Catholics to get something. And the IRA was waiting in the wings for Protestants to overplay their hand, right? And the moment they overplayed their hand, they were going to jump in and cause havoc, which is what happened. Bloody Sunday came about. And there's a very good programme where one he says, my dad rubbed his hands and said, fantastic. IRA man, ex-IRA man from the 50s. We're back in the game, he said. We're back in the game. Because you see, what people don't understand is there are people always waiting to cause some type of revolution, to cause some type of terror. They're always in the background. People forget that. You know, Northern Ireland, basically in the early 70s, late 60s, was on fire. Literally hundreds of rounds, thousands of rounds fired every day. Bombings every day. It was on fire, right? So that can happen in a society at any time. People don't understand that. They always think, oh, nothing will happen here. Oh, it's all straightforward. Believe me, it's not difficult to get people at each other's throats. The problem with politicians is they push that envelope. So, example, they say, oh, race is something people don't like. Oh, we'll use that. We'll say, get rid of refugees. Now, the left will come out and say, oh, this is outrageous, saying get rid of refugees. The right will come out and say, that's what we need to do, get rid of refugees. And each of them is recruiting. Each of them is looking their way. And some people take this to heart. And next minute, you get an MP shot dead because somebody's taking to heart, for, as he shot her, for England. Yeah, for England. Right? This is what they create. Now, the police have to clean this up in the end. Not the politician. The police clean it up.
Agreed.
This is what people don't understand. It's not a basic game. It's actually a game of many different moves in many different ways. That's why Churchill was the one that said police cannot strike in 1911. Not allowed. Because you can have, as we've seen, health service, teachers, this, that, they're all going on strike. But you have the police on strike for one day and see what happens. Because most people, they don't do things because they fear getting caught. Not because they shouldn't do them, but because they fear getting caught. But the moment they know police are not there when they break into that store and, you know, their neighbours get a brand new TV, they're having one as well.
No, I agree. And these are all really interesting topics. I'm gonna sort of try and round this out a little bit.
We have to, because we're now coming to...
I'm gonna be slightly flippant, because I know you said to me earlier, you know, I mean, I'm still gonna give it some thought about where on the timeline the press and police relationship changed. I mean, like, if I was going to be flippant, I'd probably say, like, back in 2012 when Sue Akers like started dragging journalists out of their beds on a, you know, to take them to investigations for but I am being flippant, you know. The chain was obviously broken long before then. What I would say as a final question to you then is given all of that, you know, given the value compass and the shift of the value compass with the police, you know, to circle back without being too flippant, are these high profile celebrity cases actually just wasting resources?
Yes. I can answer that quickly.
Definitive answer from Carlton there, yes.
I can say yes, but, and then I'll put the but in. Frankly, in many ways, the celebrity cases are dealt with just the same as non-celebrity cases. Because in our country, particularly for the murders or something like that, because in our country, you know, you have murder squads that deal with them. So a large number of people are dealing with these, officers are dealing with these murders or whatever they might be. What I think is more problematic is the situation that we have now, where political expedience is now creating the circumstance that, number one, the police find it problematic to let off steam in any way, shape or means, because if they do, they're then found to be not guilty of an offence, but are perceived to be somehow doing something that's not in the public interest, and therefore they get done on police civil cases that are nothing to do with the criminal law. You know, so example, if you said something now about Israel as a police officer, you can get done. If you say something now about women, you can get done. If you say something about race, you can get done. I don't care if you, and I'm talking about off duty now. You would imagine you shouldn't say something on duty, but off duty, you can be done for anything. You can be at a party, say the wrong thing, somebody pick it up the wrong way, and you're now getting done on a case from the job, which can leave you to be demoted or fired, yeah, or loss of pay or whatever. That has its background, because what happens is, the commissioner said just the other day, commissioner of the Met said the other day, we can't recruit. Well, why would anybody join? Right? Why are you going to join if everything you do is under the microscope? If you did that with media people, how many of them would still be in a job? This is what you got to ask yourself. How many of them would still be in a job if every journalist couldn't say anything? Right? Most of them be done over. That's what they're asking of the police. So you've got that aspect. The other aspect you've got of it is, because all these things now need investigating, you just don't have the people, because they're investigating stuff that frankly wouldn't have been investigated before. So now you've got massive problems, because there's all these crimes and there's mobile phones everywhere, people calling this, saying that, saying the other, and all of these things are being looked at, and they don't have the numbers to deal with these offences, of which in the end may be written off. People are going to courts when things are getting done, and what, 200 quid fine, but you've had a massive resources to deal with it. So what I'm saying is that the police has now got to look very carefully at what it does for its role. I think time has now come for police to say, mental health, we won't touch it. If you think there's a mental health problem, let that be dealt with by the NHS. That's their job. Child stuff, let that be dealt with by the children's people who deal with children. You know, the basics of, if it's a crime, then okay, they're there, that's the job. But everything else, I think police has now got to the point where they're going to have to turn around and say, no to do with us. Because they're left holding the can for all these things. Every one of these things they hold the can for. The other parties slide away. And it's bad for their morale. I know a lot of people in the police now are actually breaking down, literally breaking down in police stations, crying, etc. In police stations, breaking down. It's too much. Stress is too great for them because it's too much, and there's no support. It's different. You see, if you've got support, if everybody loves you and it's stressful, that's not a problem because everybody loves you. But when they all hate you and it's stressful, now you've got a problem. So I think we're undermining the full process. Now, the reason why I thought this was a fantastic discussion, because we looked at the celebrity angle, but underneath every one of those celebrities, there's countless non-celebrity ones that are being dealt with. And it's just now too much. It's all
okay. So Carson, I know I said that was the wrap-up question, but it isn't actually. I'm going to be greedy. Just one. So one of the criticisms of the Oscar Pistorius case that we opened the show talking about was that the investigating officer had some inconsistencies with some of the evidence, and you obviously played it out in terms of how you saw the crime as it was as it was presented in court, I suppose, as it was presented as evidence. And you obviously had some questions, and you had some challenges, and quite rightly so. If you quite often talk to me about the need for background and lifestyle checks, but given what I'm hearing from this, are you sort of saying that with a crime where there might be psychological factors or medical factors or etc., that it actually shouldn't be entirely the job of the police to gather the evidence?
I guess what I'm saying is I had the luxury of being in a part of the service, basically all of my service, whereby we could investigate, if that's the word you want to use, surveil, look into, observe, understand the particular area we were looking at. So, we had time to work it through. For regular officers, they don't have that. So I suggest to you that most of them will make flaws on initial investigation. Most of them will make flaws. And this is why, if I were a lawyer, I think I'd get everybody off. Because I think most of them, you would look through the case and you'd say, there's a flaw there, bang, let's have them. And every time there's going to be a mistake. I tell you, the greatest thing is now for any criminal in the United Kingdom, say nothing. That's it. Say nothing. From beginning to end.
Wise words. Wise words.
From beginning to end, say nothing. Because now they're going to have to prove everything. So now what people think is, oh, I'll go into the interview room and I'll say, I'll go in the interview room and I'll turn around and I'll say, no comment. Right? I'm saying that's too late. When that officer stops you in the first instance, oh, what are you doing here, mate? What's all this about? Right? And you know you've done something wrong, obviously, because you're a criminal. You know, what you probably would be best doing, and I hope they don't, would be saying, no comment. Finished. Nothing. Right?
Interesting.
Because then what are you going to hang your evidence on? What are you going to hang it on? Unless it's all there in front of you, no comment. Finished. Right from the beginning, nothing. Say nothing. Zero. Boom. Can't put yourself in the frame. You're not in the frame at all. Because everybody's innocent until proved guilty, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's it.
So what point does the so I'm just I'm just guesstimating that by the time you get to court you can't say no comment, but because you're under oath, right? But
yes, you can. What they do is, what they say is, they will take the inference from you saying no. That's what the statement says. That's what the caution says. There'll be an inference from what you later say that you didn't say then at the time. They can take an inference from that it might not be true. But no, you don't say that, do you? When you go to court, you say, my lawyer said, say nothing.
So really, but like instead of coming up with a story about a potential hypothetical burglar in the bathroom, you could just say no comment, right?
You've got it in one. His best angle was, because you see the things he said, I told to call the police. Right. So right there then, the next point from that is, well, what did she say back to you? See what I mean? So you already now you've put yourself in the frame, because now you've got to stick with that. And what did she say back to you? You can't say she said, oh, I'll call them, because you know she was in the bathroom, right? So you've done your own legs from day one. And that's before he's probably cautioned. Right? Because I don't know what's happened yet. So that's, oh, well, what happened? Oh, well, I was in bed, blah, blah, blah. And you're given a story. Now you've given that story. That's your story. You've got to stay with that part of that story. Oh, I caution you, my friend. We know you're cautioned because we're going to arrest you. Now you're cautioned. And he then says, you don't need to say anything. But you've already said something before. And that's been recorded, especially now because it's on a body-worn camera video and a video in it. So the officer switches on his video and whatever you're saying, he's recording you saying it. Right?
Right. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? These are no criminals don't do this because I want you to get caught. But this is the problem with our system. And coming back to why I'm saying it, because those good people, and when I say good people, I'm saying wealthy people who have committed crimes, those same criminals, but they're perceived as good because everybody's innocent until proved guilty. Because they're wealthy, they get a lawyer that then cleans it up afterwards. Joe Soap doesn't have that. Joe Soap has the regular court-provided officer who has got 5 different cases and isn't going to spend all the time on cleaning up every bit of your story. You see what I mean? He's not cleaning your story up. Right? So Pistorius, he said what he said, and then the lawyer would thought, oh, hell, why do you say that? Right, but let's look at this. Let's try and figure out how we can clean him. Right? Because he's paid money to all these lawyers and they're all figuring out. They'll have an investigator there who will look at the investigation and say, that officer shouldn't have done that, so we'll pick up on that. We'll put doubt in there. These are all... you don't have that if you're Joe Soap. If you just up, you have the court-appointed lawyer who says, well, the best thing is for you is put your hands up, and if you do early, if you say you did it, you'll get 10, you'll get 3 for remission for being a good bloke, you'll serve half, blah, 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 right? So he's actually saying to you, put your hands up to it. Yeah. See what I mean? That's the difference.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed. 100% agreed. And unfortunately for us in the media, one of the conditions of like Oscar Pistorius, unfortunately, isn't allowed to give a press conference until 2029. So we're all going to have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And unless he decides to reveal something on his social media accounts, which is
that's the one we haven't touched on so much, but we'll have to leave it now because we are already 2 hours in. So this is going to be a 2-parter for sure, 1 hour apiece. Again, I was just going to say Rachel would have had something to say on the medical aspects of it, on the psychological aspects of it. But I think this has been a fantastic discussion, Fergs. Actually, I think we've actually bottomed out a lot.
Oh, are you saying you're missing your mistress? I know. I kind of am too. But she's promised us. She's promised us that she'll be on the next episode. So.
No. Let's. You can't get in trouble with the wife. No, what I'm saying is we did a great job. We've looked at it from our angles, our pro angles, professional angles, from policing and from the media, and we put some big questions into play, and I think we started to answer some of them. And so I'm happy that we did a great job this week. So I'm going to leave you the final words as normal.
I would love. I think we've gone into, I think this conversation's evolved into a lot of topics that when we began the conversation, I didn't think we were necessarily follow this route. So I would love to hear what the listeners think. I'd also love to hear, just a show of hands, what do the listeners anecdotally think about the police, wherever they live and in whatever, whatever their relationship is, as a word of regulatory advisory, which I never thought I'd say, like criminals, please don't follow Carlton's advice.
Exactly, don't follow my advice. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. If you be following my advice, nothing get done. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. So with that, ladies and gentlemen,
in sidebar in brackets, celebrities totally follow Carlton's advice.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's goodbye for me. Oh, you see, they usually come in as goodbye from her.
Was that a prompt? Was that?
Yeah, it was a prompt.
Oh no. Goodbye, and Dr. Rachel will be back next time if anybody else is mourning.
I'm not mourning. See you again next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.